Hello everyone, welcome to the channel, Dark Compass. I'm so happy to tell you another story. I know many of you listen to these videos to help you fall asleep, so before we start, let's like, share and subscribe to support the channel and not miss the next episode. And tell me, where are you, what time is it when you hear this story? Take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, lean back comfortably. Because tonight, we are going to enter a house on a hilltop where the silence is not simply the absence of people, but a living thing that breathes, whispers, and calls your name. I came to that house with just one simple request: absolute silence. I didn't care when it was built, nor did I care that it stood alone on a barren hill, miles from the nearest town. I was writing a book on paranormal phenomena, and I thought being away from the hustle and bustle would help me concentrate. The plan was simple: move in, set up a desk, turn on the computer, write. I wanted peace. Before I realized that this house had private will, I arrived late one afternoon. The sky was gray, and the wind stung my face as I opened the car door. The driveway was a rocky, uneven path. The house was bigger than I had expected. The paint was peeling. Some of the windows were boarded up, the porch railings were leaning to one side, and the foundation was cracked along a thin line like a taut thread. I heard the creaking of the wood as I walked. Old house, I reassured myself. Just a few repairs, and I'll be fine. The lock clicked dryly, but the door opened immediately. The air inside was heavy with a musty smell, as if the place had been consumed by darkness for years. The last light of the day filtered through the frosted glass, touching the floating dust. The living room was small, the armrests of the armchairs torn. Next to it was a cramped dining room with a chandelier that had lost several crystal branches. I set my suitcase at the foot of the stairs leading to the second floor, opened the bag, and took out my laptop, notebook, and file box. Everything a solitary writer needed. Enough to keep busy, enough to not think about anyone. The first strange thing happened very quickly. As I was arranging books on a makeshift wooden shelf, the light bulb flickered. I looked up and clicked my tongue. Old wire. But then, from the wall behind, a thin layer of steam, like a sound whisper. Very softly, indistinct, like a breath close to my ear. The skin on my hands turned cold. Wind? I stood still, listening. 1, 2 seconds. Then silence. I laughed at myself. Scare yourself just arrived. I finished packing my books, then went upstairs. The second floor was a long hallway with many doors. Most were empty. Some had a broken bed. Others had only a stained carpet in the middle, a large bruise on the floor. I chose the room at the end of the row. The window looked straight down onto the rocky hillside. I set up a desk under the window and positioned my laptop so that the daylight would slide across the keyboard like a silver streak. I thought to myself, May just wrote, "Go to bed early tonight." But that night, the whispering returned. This time, it moved. When on the ceiling, when crawling close to the wall, then suddenly stopping right by the door. Still soft, still not forming words. I pulled the blanket up to my chest and realized that the cold was not from the weather. It spread from my bones. Every time lightning flashed past the glass door, the furniture in the room suddenly seemed to change places. The bed's shadow became longer. The chair legs gathered together like fingernails. I lay flat on my back, watching the darkness pass by, until I was so tired that I fell asleep. In the morning, my hands shook slightly, as if from a bad dream. I turned on the old stove and started to boil coffee. The stove was cold. The refrigerator shook every time I opened it. I stood watching the misty rain outside the kitchen window, sipping coffee, trying to shake off the feeling of emptiness in my head. Work was the best medicine. I rummaged around the house, looking for things that needed fixing, things that could be put to good use. Old houses sometimes hide storage compartments, cellars, things that could be turned into archives. I pushed a large wooden cabinet in the ground floor room, just to clear space against the wall. It slid away. easier than necessary, and revealed a dark opening, just big enough for a person. A cold air came from inside, thick as the breath of a long untouched cellar. I shined my flashlight. A narrow corridor of rough stone, stretching in both directions. The entrance had faded markings, circles cut by diagonals, strange symbols that looked like letters, but weren't letters. I stepped in down a step. The cold concrete floor transmitted through the soles of my shoes to my shins. After a few steps, my ears felt sealed, as when the car is going up a steep hill. The whispering rises close to the nape of my neck. I turn around and shine the light, only to see the damp, black stone wall. The corridor turns a little. One turns right, the other slopes down. I choose the slope, thinking of an old wine cellar or warehouse. The air thickens, the whisper in me voice more, but still no words. I stopped, touched the wall. The stone was wet, rough. A small drop from somewhere fell on the shoulder of my shirt. I looked up. Only darkness condensed into a thick line. I faltered. A chill ran from my spine straight to the back of my neck. I turned, half running, half stumbling. The problem was not that I was afraid. It was that every time I stopped, the footsteps behind also stopped. I rushed out and slammed the cupboard back into place, blocking the way. My heart was pounding in my chest. It took me a long time to stand up straight. That night, I rummaged through the drawers in the dining room and came across old drawing of the house. Not a single line on it told of the hallway just now. I sat down on the floor, the drawing spread out before me, and understood. Either the drawing was missing, or this house had yet opened more roads for me. I decided to just write during the day. I turned on my computer and took notes about ancient rituals, places where sound gathers, how space can distort sound, as if I were writing a treatise for myself. Corridor system theory. Sometimes the ceiling light flickered, sometimes it went out. I called the electrician from the number in the little book on the kitchen counter, but the signal on the hill was intermittent. I only had time to leave a message. No one called me back. As the night fell, the whispers drew closer. Sometimes I could hear my own name, drawn out as if through a hollow tube. I closed my laptop, stood up, and turned around whenever I felt a breath near my ear. No one was there. But the damp smell in the walls seemed heavier, as if someone had crawled through a crevice in the mud. On Saturday, I returned to find the hallway. Not behind the closet, but on the second floor, a panel of wall with an open edge that could be pulled back. Behind it was an old, narrow wooden staircase that went up between layers of walls. I held the flashlight between my teeth and stepped down each step. The cobwebs touched my forehead, wet. At the bottom was a small stone room with a low ceiling that forced me to bow my head. In the middle of the room, a wooden table with water stains. On the table, several sheets of old paper stuck together like scales, printed with the same symbols as on the wall, circles within circles, diagonal lines thickening like scars, stick figures with their heads erased. There was a schematic sketch. From the house radiated countless thin lines like roots, forming Amaz underneath. Whispers arose all at once, all around. I heard them mixed in with the sound of count the beats very softly 1, 2, 3, then stopping at a number that never repeats. I looked up and see it. In the corner of the room, where the flashlight's light was dim, stood a tall, thin, dark figure. It did not move. Its face was not clearly visible, but its shadow shook like a trail of fire. I didn't have time to think. I smashed the flashlight against the wall to distract myself and ran back up the stairs. Behind me, there was another sound of footsteps, not faster than me but not slowing down. From that night on, the house was no longer a shelter. It was a giant musical instrument, and someone was exercising the wall. I started to hear those thick as mud moments when all the wind, the insects on the hill, even my own heartbeat, seemed to be sucked into a bottomless well. Then, from the bottom of that well, a whisper emerged. I took the pages I found in my study, photographed each symbol, enlarged them, and placed them next to the notes in the book I was writing. A faint pattern began to form. Cross-hatched circles, not a charm in the folk sense, but a diagram intersection, where sounds overlap to create pressure zones. The narrow stone corridors are a pipe. Every corner, every slope, is a piano key. If you whisper at the right point, at the right pitch, the wall will ripple. Not by echo, but by data has been kept for a long time. I found another person's handwriting on the edge of the paper. Shaky handwriting, smeared ink, and a few faded dates. I could read a few words. Association. Keep whispering. Must not let the sound be broken. The writer needs to be alone. I looked around the room I was sitting in. My desk was right under the window. The wind from the hill blew in at a steady pace. I shivered slightly at the thought. Perhaps the house did not just want people to live in it. It needed a person who can write. I tried recording. I put the recorder near the wall, left it overnight. In the morning, I turned it on and listened. For several minutes there was only a soft noise, then suddenly, from somewhere, a chord thinly raised, multiple voices overlapping, not quite speaking, not quite singing. What made the hair on the back of my neck stand up was that the voices were repeat the same sentence. Jesse typed it last night. But they didn't use my words. They used different structures, different accents, as if I were writing a draft and the wall was editing, re-edit. From then on, everything sped up. Furniture shifted ever so slightly between the blinks of my eyes. The clock in the room stopped at 3:17, but when I turned away and looked back, it kept counting as if it had never stopped. One night, it suddenly rained. Opposite direction, raindrops splashed up from the ground, hitting the glass from below. I marked the hallway wall with white chalk to avoid getting lost, but the next day, the chalk marking on the ceiling like someone changed the axis. One night the lights went out. I turned on my flashlight, and the room suddenly seemed deeper, as if someone had pushed the wall at the end of the room back a meter. I heard the wooden floor breathing. From the bookshelf, there was a clicking sound like fingers tapping. I turned the light and saw a book slot had slipped, revealing a hole as dark as the mouth of a well. I knew it was an invitation, or rather, command: go on. I tied one end of the rope to the table leg, the other end around my waist, and crawled into the darkness. After a short passage, the duct opens into a circular low-ceilinged space, the walls covered with symbols. In the middle is a stone rim jutting out like the edge of a dry well. Surrounding it were 7 small stone pillars, each containing a scrap of leftover material: a bone button, a piece of glass, a shell, a worn coin, an old iron ring, a piece of carved wood, and a clump of hair tied with red thread. I placed my hand on the stone rim. The stone was cold. Inside was pitch black, and it felt not deep but hollow, a void that stretched on and on like a tunnel. I pretended not to hear the whispers changing rhythm into a question. I sat down on the floor and pulled out the old pages. Under the flashlight, the ink was smeared like rain. There was one passage I read in its entirety. Sound is not something that escapes. Sound is something that stays. Stays in stone, in wood, in people. We just need Torrider to open the ellipsis. I looked up. Inhaled, exhaled. I asked softly, to no one in particular, "What do you want?" The wall did not respond in words. It tightened the air on my throat. The flashlight suddenly dimmed. From the mouth of the round well, a very light wind blew up, carrying the smell of stagnant water and rusty iron. I understand. They want me. Read, not reading what I write, but reading what has been written here, before me, by someone who has lost his voice in this maze. I pick up a page, the writing crooked like tree roots. I imitate the path of each stroke, and sounds that are not words burst from my mouth, neither high nor low, neither round nor distorted, like yawn of stone after a long sleep. The air vibrates, the wall repli. From the pipes, footsteps came one after another, stopping right at the edge of the circle. I felt myself getting sick. The pillars seemed to be getting closer. I stopped. The rope around my waist suddenly tightened, as if someone was holding the other end and pulling. I understood that I had just been caught in some nameless ritual. If I read it all, something would step out. If I leave it unfinished, it will stay, but inside me. I choose the third way I write. I took out my notebook, turned a blank page, and placed it on the stone rim. I didn't read anymore. I wrote, "This is a house that remembers sounds." It borrows living people to copy itself. Each layer of wall, each breath, each sound of old wood. It wants the story to never end, but the story needs a full stop, not because we win, but because when I get it. I continued writing, describing the junctions, the pipes, the notation. I wrote my fear, the moment I saw the dark figure standing in the small room, the nights when the sound of the rain changed direction. I wrote until my hand shook. The whispers around me changed rhythm, no longer pressing, but becoming impatient, like a crowd blocked off at the theater doors. I put down my pen, took a deep breath, and read aloud the very lines I just wrote, this time by me language. Everything broke apart at once, not with a loud sound, but with slippage. The walls retreated half a step, the stone rim cracked a hair, the stone pillars had white veins. The wind from the well blew strongly, the flashlight went out, I was plunged into darkness. In the darkness, there was a sound laugh hoarsely, a low, distant sound, as if coming through water. Then, immediately after, a sound sigh very human, very close, close to the nape of my neck. I paused, thinking of turning around and running away. But the end of the rope was tightening around my waist like an embrace that didn't want to let go. I spoke out loud, slowly, clearly, each word. I are not read to you. I write, and I will put a period here. I put down my pen and drew a line. Black dot fingernail sized at the end of the stream, right in the middle of the rim. Off, everything, turn off. No wind, no heartbeat. For a moment, I believed I had just put a period on everything. If and somewhere, there was a sound. Water dropful, a single drop, bouncing off the stone and splashing onto my wrist. The flashlight dimmed back. The circular room was still there, the rim was still cracked, but the columns, each one was missing something. The bone button was gone. The shell was gone. The coin too. In their place were a small piece of paper like baggage tickets, each dotted with a black ink dot. I understood. They had been changed. They took away the evidence associated with the people who had been detained here and returned them. Dot small, but an end. I fumbled with the rope and turned around. When I closed the bookshelf, the lights in the room came back on as if they had never been off. The clock continued to tick past 3:18. I sat down on the floor, my back against the wall, and for the first time in days, can't hear a whisper. Only my heartbeat, slow, heavy, real. I slept as heavily as a rock. In the morning, I walked around the house. I tried to push back the wooden cabinet on the ground floor. The back hallway no more. I knocked on the wall. The sound was solid. I went upstairs and looked at the open panel. It was tightly closed. Even with new nail at the edge, I did not close. I understood. The house did not disappear the paths. It fully closed like a book. I made coffee. The smell of hot coffee spread through the kitchen, chasing away the old, damp smell. Before I sat down at the table, I opened my notebook again. The page with the black dot was still there. The ink was dry, dark like enamel pinned the story. I put my hand on the page and felt something I hadn't touched in days. Real quiet, not a space someone could squeeze a whisper into, but a space that was full enough, like after you've taken a deep breath and there's nothing more to say. I wrote the story again, this time not to serve the house, but to understand why it needed a writer. I thought of the sentence on the old paper, sound is what stays. People pass by, voices pass by, booty de stay. Those who have lived here have probably gathered all the things they dare not say into structure. Corridors, corners, signs. They hope that one day, someone will come in, read on, and connect ellipsis. But perhaps they forgot one little trick that every story needs: conclude. I stayed a few more days to check things out. No more nights of rain. No more stopped clocks. No more smell of stagnant water. But I carry with me one small memory. Sometimes when it gets too quiet, my left ear languagea thin sound like a stretched thread, a frequency ivory lightly, like someone plucking a string far away. I don't find it scary. It just reminds me that every story, even the one that has been punctuated, can still bear a tail note if you want. Before leaving, I returned to the circular room again. I did not open the bookshelf, nor did I go in. I just stood in front of the wall where I had heard the tapping sound and said softly, "Thank you. Thank you for teaching me that fear is not something to be erased, but something to bename. When it has a name, it stays in its right place, like a book stays on its right shelf." I came down the hill while the morning sun was still cool. The wind rustled the yellow grass. The house watched me go silently like a well-fed animal. I knew I would return not to stay, but to tell this story in my own way. Because in the end, I didn't come there to collect whispers. I came top at a period. And perhaps right now as you listen, the memory of the house is looking up, like a fish that has been submerged for a long time at the sound of oars. It doesn't swim closer. It just opens its eyes. It accepts that tiny dot. But if at any moment you suddenly find the room you're sitting in has sunk a half step deeper, or the clock has stopped for a brief beat, don't panic. Take a slow breath, name the feeling in your head, and put a period. Once you've placed your order, tell me, where are you? What time is it? Because as I understood in that round room, sound is not what escapes. Sound is what stays. And among the countless things that stay, word is the only thing we can choose to end with. You choose to end it with a period, or let it stretch into an ellipsis. That's your choice. As for me tonight, I choose it. If you've made it this far, thank you for sticking with me and the house on the hill. This story is a small part of a book I'm writing about listening spaces, places where the walls, ceilings, and floors support not just the roof, but the things people don't have time to say. I'll keep telling you for as long as you want. And before I end, let me reiterate a small but important thing about the channel. If you find this story worth a quieter night, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment telling me where you were and what time it was when you heard this line, so I know where your dot was tonight. See you next time. Sleep tight, and if any whispers come through the night, name them and put a dot.